Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This is going to be my Marvel New Mutants movie review. That is right, I had a chance to see an actual movie in a theater of sorts. It was a drive-in theater, so I'll explain what that was like. But no joke, I was actually able to see the New Mutants movie amidst all the release dates that we've gotten the past couple of years. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. We'll do a new Amazon giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and let me know in the comments where you want to see these characters come back in a new Marvel MCU movie during Marvel Phase 4 or Marvel Phase 5. What I'm going to do in this video is I'll start with the non-spoilery part, and then I'll give a spoiler warning later in the video when I talk about more specific things about the ending of the movie. And I know some of you will ask me, so I will rank this compared to some of the other last big X-Men movies towards the end of the video. Overall, it was a much smaller horror version of a Marvel X-Men movie, so don't go into it expecting the same thing that you would expect from a mainstream giant $150 million Marvel MCU or X-Men or even Avengers movie. It's more of a mid-budget Logan Wolverine style movie. But you've posted all the memes about all the release dates. They even started to make fun of themselves. Would this movie ever get to see the light of day? Finally, they just decided that screw the virus, we're going to release it no matter what the box office is. So I went to see it at a drive-in theater. It was perfectly safe. I didn't feel like there were any issues with that. The experience was fun. I'd never actually been to a drive-in movie before. I listened to the audio from the movie on my car speakers. So even though that was a little bit weird, all the music, the dialogue, all the sound design, the jump scares, everything still worked just fine. The speakers in my car were pretty normal. But we could spend an entire video just talking about the history of this movie and how it eventually wound up on screen. But it is one of Marvel's first horror movies in general, and the first horror X-Men movie that I can think of, even though there's some horrific elements in other Marvel movies. But as I talk about the movie, you'll start to notice that there are various points through the film where it's not quite sure whether or not it wants to be a horror film or if it wants to be a more mainstream X-Men film. Josh Boone, the director, pitched the movie as a rubber reality mixture of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest meets A Nightmare on Elm Street, with a bunch of characters not being sure what is real, being trapped in this asylum, what's happening in our minds, what's happening in the real world. But because this is a comic book X-Men Marvel movie, the metaphorical terrors of their psychic space, their minds, also become real things in the real world they have to face. The movie paints its themes in very broad strokes, and it's very easy to follow, which was kind of disappointing for me. Usually I like a more complex film. Like I'm thinking more Christopher Nolan's Tenet, which you kind of need a bunch of graphs and charts to be able to follow. It's only 90 minutes long, which is very, very short for a Marvel movie, and even though the director avoided a total reshoot situation and Fox trying to overhaul the movie completely, there is still a lot of X-Men Marvel movie crossover elements connecting the movie to other big Marvel movies. I don't want to get into too many big spoilers about that in the video. I will do a separate video for the ending, the Marvel Phase 4 of it all, and how they're going to handle these characters inside the MCU now that Marvel has control of all the X-Men and Fantastic Four characters. But overall, I just gave the story of the movie a passing grade. It's a solid setup. They're putting the team together for the first time, and the movie was originally intended to set up a trilogy. We actually know what the story is for that entire trilogy now that the director's come out and told us, because he doesn't think that he's going to be able to make the other films. But the story of the movie is based on the very first New Mutants comic book story, the Demon Bear Saga. In that, Danny Moonstar is trying to defeat Demon Bear, a very powerful mutant that killed her parents and most of her tribe. The movie makes a lot of changes to their comic book backstories of the characters. I didn't mind some of the changes given the circumstances around the making of the movie and the overall current state of the Fox X-Men Marvel movie universe. I know we're all kind of hoping that Deadpool 3 is going to be titled Deadpool Kills the Fox Marvel Universe, and that's how they handle all that continuity in the MCU going forward. But I have to say, one of my biggest issues with the movie is that Danny Moonstar is the main protagonist, the POV character that you follow through the whole movie. She opens the film, she ends the film, but she's arguably the least interesting character in it. Probably the shining star to come out of all this is Magic, played by Anna Taylor-Joy. She did a great job performing her character, and her character is written really well too. All the actors did great jobs with their characters in general. I'll talk about them in more detail in a second. But just Danny Moonstar by herself as a character felt underwritten, and her arc felt more like a CW version of an X-Men character arc. She even narrates the opening of the movie and narrates the ending like they do on CW TV shows. And it's not a spoiler to say that they also use some Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show clips in the movie at various points just to comment on what the action of the movie is, and that show aired on the network that became the CW. But Magic was great in the movie, like I said, probably one of the standout stars that they absolutely have to bring back in the future MCU Marvel movies at some point. Now you understand why so many of the trailers that they release focus on her scenes, her powers, and the big record drop moments involving her. The way she's written and performed, though, by Anya Taylor-Joy, it almost feels like Magic is in a completely different movie from all the other characters, and the movie probably should have been about her. Even her backstory, as they explain it during the movie, is way more compelling than Dani Moonstar's backstory. That also gets into a lot of the crossover elements, the Easter eggs for other big X-Men and MCU Marvel movies that they have in there. Maisie Williams was great as Wolfsbane. She plays her as Scottish, so it was kind of funny listening to her deliver all of her dialogue with a Scottish brogue. She also had one of the more compelling story arcs in the movie, too. They actually filmed this movie way back between Game of Thrones Season 6 and Season 7, so we're talking a long time ago, but even though all the other actors look way older now, somehow she still seems exactly the same, like she does not age at all. Pretty sure, just like Magic, Maisie Williams also said that she'd love to come back in future Marvel movies. But Charlie Heaton was also pretty decent as Cannonball. Most of you will know him from Stranger Things. I do think he's generally better in the work that he does on Stranger Things than he was in this movie. He plays his character with a strange Southern American accent. It didn't bother me that much, but it just felt like it wasn't absolutely necessary for his character. The way they visualize his powers and the special effects are really cool, though. Sunspot was okay. I hadn't seen the actor playing him in anything before, so I didn't really have any expectations for him, but based on what the director said, they just wanted his character to be this spoiled, douchey, rich kid when the movie begins who slowly matures as the team comes together, and as written, I thought he did a pretty decent job with that. Because Roberto da Costa has bigger ties, his father, to the Hellfire Club, his character would have been much bigger in the sequels had they done them. There was a deleted post-credit scene involving his father in the Hellfire Club that would have helped set up all that stuff, but I'll talk about that in more detail in a separate video just because it is kind of spoilery. Alice Braga was great as Celia Reyes. She's the Nurse Ratched of the movie if we're talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest metaphors. They did a really good job writing her as a very complex character. She's not necessarily a villain during the film, per se, but they do use her character to tie together some of the larger X-Men Marvel movie Easter eggs and big post-credit scenes from other big movies. So I will talk about that in my Easter egg video. You also probably just saw her in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad trailer just this past weekend. I've already done a video for that too, playing a DC character no less. The movie's coming out next year, so it is funny to see actors jumping back and forth between the Marvel and DC universe. David Dastmalchian from Ant-Man and the Wasp is also in that same Suicide Squad movie as Polka Dot Man. Overall, the special effects, the sound design, the score were all pretty decent. Even though I was listening to the audio, like I said, through my car speakers, it didn't lose any of its quality. It was a good experience, and the audio is a really, really important part of the overall movie-going experience. But one of the major things about the movie that just did not work for me at all was the ending. The way they tie things off with Dani Moonstar's arc, because she is the main character, just feels like something right out of a CW TV show. And it kind of made the movie feel like an expensive episode of TV more than an actual movie. So just careful for spoilers. Spoiler warning, we'll get into more specific details and some of the issues that I have with the film. So I felt like the whole Demon Bear arc was super underwritten, and I did not like how they changed it, making him more of a metaphorical villain, quote-unquote, than an actual full-blown X-Men comic book villain. Like, the whole message of the movie is to not let your fear control you, and they kind of beat you in the face with that at various points in the film. And instead of Demon Bear being this crazy, cosmic mutant bent on destroying Dani Moonstar, he's just a psychic projection of her own fears, that she then pats on the head like he's a good boy, and proceeds to just wish him away, like I won't let my fear control me. So that was just a little too much for me. It didn't completely ruin the movie for me or anything like that. I think the movie would have fared a lot better if they would have committed to the horror element and just done it as an R-rated film and leaned into all the really scary stuff, because most of the time it felt like it was bouncing back and forth between mainstream X-Men film, traditional PG-13 for family audiences, and then a couple of scares that weren't really that scary, so it kind of failed as a horror film. But overall, the movie did feel like a very enjoyable rental movie, so this would have been a perfect VOD release. So my other really big complaint about this is the fact that Fox let it sit on a shelf for a long time. There were some people inside Fox that wanted to completely reshoot the entire film, thinking that the cost would be worth it because the budget was so low compared to the budget of the mainstream X-Men films. Like, them throwing away $50–60 million was no big deal. So when you hear people say that the movie feels like it comes from a different era of comic book movies and even X-Men Marvel movies, that's why, because the movie was made years ago when that was all happening. And it does feel very weird that it is the very last Fox X-Men Marvel movie. Really, that should have wound up being the Logan movie. Ranking this with some of the other more recent X-Men movies, I would say it's definitely better than X-Men Dark Phoenix. I wasn't nearly as disappointed coming out of this as I was of X-Men Dark Phoenix, just because I had so many big expectations for a Dark Phoenix storyline. I always went into this movie knowing that it would be a really small thriller horror film. But given the current state of the world and the fact that most movie theaters are closed, it was a lot of fun to go to the drive-in and see a movie like this. So it totally works as a drive-in movie, and hopefully they'll release it pretty quickly video on demand sometime in the next month or two. I don't know how long they plan on leaving it in theaters. So what'll happen is my video on the ending, the Easter eggs post-credit scene, Marvel Phase 4 X-Men stuff will happen probably sometime this weekend. As long as you have alerts enabled for my channel, you should see that video when I post it. Once you do have a chance to see the movie, just let me know what you think of it in the comments below. Overall, like I said, enjoyable movie, but just very mid-budget, just don't have a lot of expectations going into it. While you wait for everything, everyone click here to rewatch the Batman trailer with Robert Pattinson a billion more times, and click here for my video on the new Spider-Man 3 movie title reveal. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, we'll see you guys tonight.